Something I found out was that your grandmother was a...
Hey, your homework very good, you know.
What does it mean for Singapore?
It's a new global order. We are not a winner at all. This is going to affect everyone adversely.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest today is a true trailblazer in Singaporean politics. She's the first woman in Singapore to helm a full ministry, the current Minister for Sustainability and the Environment, and the Minister in charge for Trade Relations. She's a champion for climate action and also the President of the Singapore National Olympic Council. Please welcome Minister Graceful. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
You met John several years ago on a different channel.
Yeah.
Play Kopi.
Which I just reminded her
That's
this
right.
morning.
That's right. And there's still people coming up to me and reminding me of it.
really?
Yes.
Okay.
You are the first ever minister I ever shot anything with, I think.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that time.
yeah.
Oh, such a privilege.
No, such a privilege for me.
I hope I
No,
didn't
for us.
leave you traumatized.
No, it was completely the first of its
I
kind
think it
during
left
that
me
time.
traumatized.
No, it was so strange because it was so rare for us to see a minister play kopi pong or just do anything like casually like that. You guys did touch on a lot of topics, but it's your first time on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
We thought, if you don't mind, we start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Get to know you a little bit again. From what I read, and obviously we've learned from that show as well, you could have had a fairly good life in private sector, and yet you made the jump to politics. What made you make that jump?
Oh, there were several reasons. I think I met PM and so just one of those Chinese New Year PM visit, the port kind of visits.
Yeah.
And then I had a chance to, really interacted with him for about an hour. And then the next thing I know is that there was a tea invitation to go and see him. When that sort of idea sort of proposed to me about joining him, so of course it's like, I never thought about it, I was already quite busy in the business, minding my own business and also minding my family business as well as my kids.
Yeah.
So I did what typical accountant would do. It's like I put pros and cons, like a balance sheet, It's like,
What's
what
on
do
the
I do?
pro side?
Yeah, it's like, precisely. Right? It's like not a lot on the pro side.
Wow.
So I started off with, okay, what are the cons? What is it that I don't agree? So actually, I realized that there's quite a lot of agreement in terms of values. I may not like the way that policies are implemented or delivered.
Okay.
You imagine that this is 20 years back.
Yeah.
So the delivery is kind of blunt. It's like, I tell you so, this is what's going to happen. There's very little engagement and dialogue, and there's no sort of co-creation business,
Right, with the public.
With the public.
Right,
with the public.
okay.
And no, hardly any sort of feedback mechanism. That was a time 20 years back,
Okay.
right? So I was like, okay, I don't quite like the way that it is sort of packaged to the public, but fundamentally, there's a lot of alignment. I must understand that I was running a business, a very competitive business, cutthroat business globally.
Yeah.
We were fighting for business with many countries around the world. And
TSA, right?
TSA,
Yeah,
the port.
you're the CEO.
Yeah. If it's so hard for us to run a port like that in Singapore, it must be quite difficult to run a country, entire country.
Confirm.
Yeah.
On the other side is that, okay, if I give up this chance, I think there are two things that's going to happen to me. First, if I disagree with any policies that's going to come after this, I think I have to shut up for the rest of my life, right?
Right.
Because you had the chance, had a go at it, and you didn't take it up. And why do you blame others for not making the right decision? Secondly, I always had this question in my mind, which I asked PM. I said, hey, I'm not scholar, I'm not scholar. I'm not one of those that has gone through your admin office and public service. Why me? There's so many talents within your reach, right?
Yeah.
So he sort of turned around and looked at me and says that we need people from private sector, public sector, we need men, women. And if you think that there's so many people wanting to come, do you think that I would need to talk to you?
Right.
So I said, it's sort of like, ding, it's a penny drop.
Right.
I may not be A team, I may be B team, I may be C team, but the fact that he probably had talked to quite a lot of people who have the same concern as me.
Wouldn't call
Why do you
scholars
want to do
A team
this?
But
Yeah.
okay. Strong start there. Strong start.
No scholar and no overseas education. So I said, okay, he must have reason to want me to be in the team. Right? And I asked myself, if I sort of give this opportunity a miss, and if Singapore doesn't turn out better, and my children, their future is at stake, can I sort of look myself in the mirror and say, okay, you make the right decision or not? So that again is sort of a question I had in my mind. So after that, I said, okay, I was 42 at that time. I said, okay, heck, let's give it a go. If I don't make it, if I'm a nuisance in there, I'm sure the PM will fire me in no time and be out 5 years, 10 years. Yeah, but here I am, 20 years later.
There's also such a huge trade-off. Like you kind of alluded to it, which is about like the family life, right?
Yeah.
Like and I guess like the lack of privacy then on. Like, was that a major consideration?
There was, but I must say 20 years ago, social media wasn't really an in thing yet. You don't have people going around with a handphone. Definitely no handphone at that time to take photo and post online. At that time, we didn't have experience in social media. So when the social media sort of got introduced, it was a major change for us. We all had to learn to embrace it. Kids at that time, they were very aware that, if the mother takes on this post, they will be under the spotlight. There will be people always sort of like watching them and putting them in scrutiny in school, which I think on hindsight, at least that's how I felt it. My kids may think otherwise. I think their friends were pretty kind. I didn't hear them coming back with nasty comments and things like that. But also, thankfully, I think they were reasonably well behaved. Other than homework not passed up and all that, but there wasn't much disciplinary problems as well. So thank God.
What's on the cons list? What is something you knowingly know that you're gonna take as a trade-off?
My career. And do I have the time to manage
to
three?
quit as CEO, join this, and then if you suck there, you get fired, then you...
Well, I didn't quit immediately. I had a few months of really trying to balance the three, which is quite impossible, especially in the beginning because I was very new. I was introduced very, very close to nomination and campaign.
2006, right?
2006, it's like I was sort of... this is after Chinese New Year in February, March. And by the time they had all this tea and all that and formalize it, it's almost March, April. So it's about right now. And then it was like, okay, you go and try to understand
They make
grassroots.
decisions
That was-
this late.
yeah,
From the
that's
first
surprising.
interaction to election was like 2 months.
Chinese
1,
New
2
Year
months.
to-
Right now, someone
to-
having some tea. Morning tea.
This is a minister's
I
speed,
think
right?
we have now gotten better.
Yeah, okay,
the
okay.
tea a little bit earlier. A little bit earlier. But I think there's still people that is in the process of being finalized.
Wow.
Do you think you're one of the shortest, flip between when you talked and when you ran?
I don't think so. I'm
okay.
probably not the last, but I'm one of the last maybe.
Okay,
yeah.
right.
So it's like, okay, you go and learn. It's like, grassroots. Oh, branch work.
Yeah.
Never had any chance. Yeah. So a little bit tentative, I would say. But I do have 20 years of working experience.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, and managing sort of organizations. So I said, okay, I'll give it a go and okay, let's dive into it. And yeah, in the beginning, in the first few months, you can't do work in office because you're really down on the ground and trying to meet as many people as possible, trying to understand all the acronyms, CCC, CCMC and all that, right? Yeah,
I don't know
so,
what you're talking about.
yeah. So it's like all the grassroots organizations and what's grassroots and what's not. And so trying to understand the lay of the land.
You mentioned about your kids being in the limelight, in the spotlight almost in school. I say we'll go all the way to the beginning. Something I found out was that your grandmother was the longest serving principal.
Hey, your homework very
at,
good,
Nanyang Girls High School.
Not many people connect me.
Oh.
Yeah, really.
Okay,
on the English media. The
Thank
Chinese
you,
media would...
producers.
Because we read Chinese newspaper every morning. Right?
Yeah. So I found out that she was the longest serving principal at Nanyang Girls High School. Obviously, she stopped being the principal before you entered. But was there any scrutiny or any limelight? Did teachers know?
My grandmother came to Singapore in the 1920s or so and became a principal for 40 years, right?
Yeah.
So it's a time when the schools are not nationalized. This is in the colonial governments before PAP and all that. So schools are all funded by community, whether churches, mission, or community like Hokkien, Hui Kwan, or Dito, right? Because she was doing a good job, so she just left there 40 years. Nowadays, you don't hear that much, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a teacher, you probably have studied under her, taught by her, stayed in the hostel that she ran,
Right.
and then became a teacher with her. So she must have selected, you, interviewed you, groomed you and everything. So everybody is like, oh, principal, and she's very stern.
Okay.
Yeah, so you imagine that there's a certain respect, but fear also of Madam Liu. Yeah, so when the granddaughter came, it's like everybody's like, this
Revenge.
this little one coming here. Yeah, either revenge or we better make sure that we do a good job with her, right?
Okay.
First day in school. Yeah, already caught up for not queuing up.
Oh, yo.
Aiyo.
Yeah, for not queuing up because we have to queue up to go to the canteen.
Sure.
Because it's rostered, right? So not queuing up. So I have to write 我以后会排队, which means that
Right.
I will line up in the future.
Okay.
Yeah,
And did
like
you?
a line, 100 lines.
Okay.
And it's like first primary one, you know.
Yeah.
I said, how do you write 我? How do you write 排? How do you write the
You're
word?
not even in
Sure.
a generation where punishment was writing lines, right?
No.
You
I
know,
for some
I don't
reason
think
it's
I
the
ever wrote a
worst.
line.
Like I rather the
you
teacher
write
beat
lines?
me. Eh.
Oh.
Because it's like one and done.
Yeah, one and done.
Yeah.
This one is quite a long emotional trauma. Eh.
Yeah. No, by like the 50th line, you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, then you try and get creative. You use like 4 pencils and try and do it.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, if you got Chinese
Actually, primary
lines,
school, yeah, I had
he's
that,
drawing 20 things. Because
Yeah.
like what is even Chinese words do? It's a bloody drawing.
Yeah, so you all have quite traumatized childhood, I can
Yeah, the
see.
Chinese is a violent one for some reason.
So anyway, first day in school, P1, I have to do that. And I sort of had this feeling that the teacher was quite happy to make me do that. I think in her mind is that she has done her work. She sent a signal that even though you are the principal's granddaughter,
Yeah.
you're not going to get a free ride, right? So, okay, so...
Wow, sending a message. Something else that we found out as well. Your dad was a press sec to the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew.
Oh.
Did that like kind of channel or like shape your views on governance?
Right.
Yeah, it's a very
Have you ever
different
met-
generation. I have not... That's one thing. I've
Yeah.
never met. And the two of them, both Mr. Lee and my dad, have kept family away from work.
Okay.
Right.
The closest I have come to him, to meet him, was looking at him and Mrs. Lee from afar when we picked up dad from airport. Because they do
Right.
go on official trips quite a lot together. And this is, older airports when there's a VIP room and then,
Right.
you will wait there for the plane to arrive. And my mother would sometimes just go and say hello to Mrs. Lee, but I will stay at the corner. It's like kids not to be seen, stay at the corner. And then, when they come in, it's usually hurried. Okay, go. And then I would just, oh, Mr. Lee,
Right.
Mrs. Lee. Then, okay, where's that? That's somewhere far behind. So
Luggage.
that's all. That's all. But it's also a time when this is before modern technology. There's no cell phone again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you imagine that? And my dad has this streak of, sometimes being a rebellion. He loves sports and he plays competitive tennis, table tennis. Yeah. And he would be out in the field, in the clubs on Saturdays and Sundays. He doesn't want to be contacted, actually. I feel that he's getting away. He doesn't say so, but
It's
I
the best
think
job
that...
ever lah for him. The best job ever.
No, because he's always on call
Right.
all the time. But he wants to be away,
need
so
some
he
escape, I
basically just take
I
up
see,
his
I see.
tennis rackets and he go to the club.
Yep.
And guess what happens when Mr. Lee looks for him? This is before
the home
mobile phone.
So call the house.
Call the
Then you
house.
pick up the phone.
Then we pick up the phone and they say, oh, this is Mr. Lee's SO. We are looking for him. Please go and look for your father. Then I'll go look around. If mom is around, say, Mom, if mom is not around, what do you do? It's like,
Call the police. Do you think being in the system for 20 years helps you or harms you? In a sense of your perspective of the world and what Singaporeans are looking for in their governors?
so I ask that question a lot, right? Because every time when it comes to sort of end of the term, it's like, okay, do I still have a role to play to the next one? I don't want to take for
Can
granted
quit
that.
out, man. You can just like, I think I have no more role to play. Then just like resign. Easy.
First of all, you have a realization, right?
Yeah.
If you have to ask yourself and you think that, okay, I have a role, and then you have to ask whether your boss thinks the same.
Yeah. I see.
Right. So, and you know that the PAP will have to refresh about a fifth to a quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, because on the average, 4 terms, and I'm 4 terms already, right? So I say, okay, it's time to really rethink and ask myself, self-evaluation.
Yeah.
Are you still growing in this organization?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like many of you would do that, right? Is this organization good for you? And, is this role fit for you? So I ask that all the time. Yes, there's a certain sort of, less learning because I've been in this system for 20 years. But at the same time, the issues that are evolving are also quite different from 20 years past. Just look at communications, right? When I first started, mainstream media, you give a good press report and media statement, it gets printed more or less the way that, you have drafted it. Everyone reads that.
Yeah.
So that's your form of communication. But now I think it is a totally different set of
Yeah.
skill sets that need to connect, need to communicate. And all the more that because it's very fragmented, so actually your stakeholders are receiving news, information differently and having different interpretation. So how to understand the different needs of the segments, what their perspectives are, takes a different set of skill sets. And I'm learning from my younger colleagues every day, how to embrace the new platforms and how to make more effective communication. Yeah.
I feel like most people when they enter politics, they're very like, we're idealists, we have like a lot of big ideas we want to implement. Was there anything that a policy or maybe like a solution that you wanted to implement, and then you got into the game of governance, and then you're like, oh, there's actually a lot of things that prevent this thing from being feasible?
I think from an MSE perspective, probably one policy will be smoking.
Oh, you're gonna come in and ban smoking. I see.
That I couldn't do.
So you're like, you have to like blanket ban it, but there's a lot of things that prevent that
why
from
can't we
coming
ban
true.
smoking?
Okay.
Because it's so ingrained. I looked at my own area. We sometimes upgrade the community spaces. And then you see this group of uncles, they are always there with a cup of kopi and smoke with friends.
Yeah.
And you want to tell them
joys
at
of life.
60 and 70 that, uncle, you cannot smoke anymore. Really?
Yeah.
I feel for them.
Yeah.
Right? So at the local level, please don't tell Ong Yi Kang. At the local level, when
think he watches this,
I upgrade, I actually put back a little smoking corner.
Okay.
I put trellis, I put plants, creepers around it so that the uncles can go in there and smoke. I didn't call it a designated smoking point, but they know that it's a smoking point.
Right.
So that they can still smoke, not from the full glare of the people walking by, but they have a little corner.
Speaking of smoking ban, like I don't know if you're familiar with what Keir Starmer is doing in the UK to increase the smoking ban. I mean, the age of smoking every year until you get to the point where nobody is being born who can smoke. What do you think about that policy? I don't think implementation.
Theoretically, it sounds good because in the end, maybe after 18 years or maybe more, because you always have people that have started smoking and will live 40, 50 years, right? So it can be 40, 50 years long before you see a complete phase out of cigarettes.
Yeah.
Very difficult to implement.
Yeah, the
because if you
enforcement
see
will be so
someone,
difficult.
that's right. You see one smoking, you go
age
out and say,
check.
how old are you?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you below?
You're
or
start
you think-
screening everyone at the smoking corner.
Yeah, and then someone is selling a cigarette and say, who are you selling to? Is this the kid or is it?
Imagine being 44 and you can't buy cigarette, but the 45-year-old can.
Exactly, right?
Being able to spot like whether you are 45 or 45, right? It's so difficult.
So that's exactly why, sometimes you have idealism.
Yeah.
You have ideas, but when it comes to actual implementation, there are, we have to deal with people. You have to deal with behaviors.
Yeah.
You have to deal with untidiness. You have to deal with, what's the implication if you're unable to enforce fairly.
Yeah.
It's going to cause a lot of unhappiness, right? One good example would be climate change and climate action. All right? We all want to do the right thing. 7 in 10 Singaporeans recognize climate change as a serious issue. Right?
When y'all
Affects
do these surveys
them.
though, to be honest, I've never been surveyed on climate change in my life.
Have you been surveyed at all?
No. Is
Are
it
you
the person that stopped me
available?
at train stations? I don't know. Where is this?
Yeah, sometimes they call. I've been
wonder.
called before. Sometimes they email to
They call
me.
you,
Yeah, because you make yourself available.
These
They
guys
don't
are
know
good
you,
at shutting
right?
down cold calls, I think.
Yeah. But when you ask the question, how many of you are prepared to pay for climate action? 3 in 10. So you want to move, you want to act on climate, but there's a lot of reservation about cost of living, impact, right? So that's the challenge. I mean, I like to see acceleration, but yet I need to be realistic because the other countries around us are not moving as fast, and our companies are also asking us, are there, realism in your carbon tax? Are you affecting our competitiveness? So these are real issues.
I did want to touch on that though, because I think you've been at the forefront of pushing Singapore's sustainability efforts. The Green Plan being one of them, greengov.sg as well. I am someone who is environmentally conscious when it's convenient or if it's at a cost advantage to me, and I think that's quite realistic of a lot of people.
Agree.
How did sustainability become such an important cause for you?
Because when you are in this portfolio and you start to look at the data and science regularly and in detail, at first I would do things that, sort of government asked me to do.
Yeah.
Right? I know that, there's a move towards electrification, public transportation. Okay, all right, okay. So when I see my colleagues also getting an EV, then I start to, sort of pay attention.
But you know why we're getting the EVs, right?
Huh?
Because petrol's expensive. I'm not really
It's a
thinking about
cost
air
advantage.
quality around me, to be honest.
Why is that so? Because petrol actually has a carbon tax. Whereas that's why there's already a tax
Yes.
on emission.
Okay.
And that's the right thing to do because there is an externality.
Right.
When you drive a car, when you have burn diesel, you are actually producing CO2 and that's causing the problem. Whereas renewable doesn't,
Yeah.
right? So that's why you have a cross differential.
So where do you find the motivation to do this? Because traditionally, we've tried to talk about climate change many times on this episode. Not because we truly care about it. So it's just like,
Why?
we feel like at this point of time, it's a good time to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
And our audiences don't care. We also like actually dry.
Our views dip, the interactions dip whenever it's sustainability related.
Is that right? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So like the trade-off for sustainability is often I have to pay more for something else. So like your job is like,
So
if
actually
you don't do your job, people are happier. You know what I mean? If you do your job,
No,
people get
yeah,
upset.
yeah, yeah. But so it's important for us to communicate the impact of climate change. So I think for a long time, environmentalists somehow, because of the cause that they promote, somehow, sometimes it's related to saving the orangutans or saving the turtles. Maybe seems sometimes narrow to some people, But if you try to sort of broaden it and say that every single one of us, not the animals alone, but every single human being is going to be impacted in many ways by climate change, I think that narrative will soon change, right? And this is my job. I have to go out and promote the cause. How does it impact us? First, I think it is rain, right? And the rain here, we're not talking about, a few days cool temperature. We're talking about potentially flood that can cause difficulties. We're talking about potentially damage to some properties. If you just imagine a flood that happened in New York, that happened in Singapore, the flood water basically inundated the tube system. That actually could happen to us if we have not
No,
prepared.
but is there anything we can actually do about it? Because if you look at the meteorological data, right, the cloud is bigger than the country. You know what I mean? Our cloud extends to Malaysia, and if
So-
we are the only ones cleaning up our air, what is the point?
You're right.
Yeah.
So emission cannot be done just by Singapore. But if everybody takes the attitude, right?
Yeah. No lah. I mean, to a certain extent, we have to
Yeah.
move with the world, or no first mover advantage. Right? You know what I mean? I don't
So we
see
are not saying that we are first mover, but we want to be with the pack. So I spend a lot of time internationally engaging all the counterparts.
Oh.
We take part in international, negotiations, try to get everybody to agree to a deadline and to work towards a
Hey,
deadline.
guys, wake up your idea.
Yeah.
You gotta do that.
Yes,
It's
yes.
Somebody's gotta do it lah. Who's the natural person to do it? ASEAN ah.
So actually, we are leading in many instances. In a COP basically is a meeting of parties. So COP is the meeting that UN has started. Every countries are represented, and at every COP meeting, there will be certain topics that we want to work on. Largely on mitigation. How do we, as a global community, reduce our emission? Starting with the most developed countries and then developing countries following, given the technology, given the resources to follow. And each year we'll be saying, okay, what have we done, guys? Stock take. How is it? How has it been going?
Oh, you're
Who's
the
doing?
annoying
Who's not
chairs,
doing? Yeah. So usually we'll take up, one or these few topics, and Singapore will lead.
Right.
We have been leading for the last few years, leading global discussions on that topic. And my topic actually was Article 6.
Which is? I'm so sorry. Yeah, not as learned as you expect us to be.
No. So I just want to see whether there's a question mark, or an exclamation mark.
Oh yeah, Article 6. Yeah.
Many questions.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
between
yeah,
Article 5 and 7. Yeah.
Okay.
I've read a lot of articles, like maybe I missed out 6.
No, this is wild. So there are actually activists out there who actually recognizes what that means. Like Article 6.
Looking at nuclear.
Yes,
Wow,
yes,
okay.
So Article 6 actually refers to a specific article in the Paris Agreement that all of us signed up. All the countries have signed up, right? So Article 6 basically says it has a very generic heading, voluntary cooperation. So imagine, right, in Singapore, I want to have renewable energy.
Yeah.
But I can't because I don't have enough space to install the solar panels, right? I need bigger land.
Yeah.
But somewhere across the ocean, there is a country. So right now we have Malaysia that's keen to sell us, Cambodia that's keen to sell us, Indonesia, Australia. So Australia, as an example, huge landmass, right?
Yeah.
Lots of desert land that can install solar panel, put a cable over, and then you get cooperation. So this is one of the cooperation.
Yeah.
So we get to buy, they benefit because they get paid, and then the solar panel makes commercial sense because there's a buyer in Singapore. But imagine that I don't have this connection. Let's say somewhere in Bhutan, Papua New Guinea, Ghana, Peru, no cable. What do? I can still cooperate with them. What happens in Peru is that a coastal town basically came with a carbon credit. Singapore will pay them X amount for the fishermen to plant seagrass along the coast. What does seagrass do? It takes in carbon dioxide. As you know, plants will absorb CO2 and therefore it takes CO2 away from the atmosphere, right? Then the grass also rehabilitates the ecosystem in the ocean.
Right.
And actually you find that actually fish gets healthier. The fish stock actually rehabilitates it.
Right.
So actually the fisherman is able to have more fish as well. So it achieved multiple eco restoration objective along with carbon reduction objective.
But how do you balance that with what, like if Singaporeans, for example, the day-to-day Singaporeans are struggling today, right? And Singapore is paying other people to grow seagrass, right? Like I'm gonna be pissed off.
So the question is, if I don't do this, right? If I don't care about climate change at all, who's gonna pay for all the outcomes and implications of climate change, right? So is it going to be, somewhere in Bhutan, or is it going to be somewhere here?
Right.
All this ice cap melting stuff that we read about, the water is not staying in North Pole or South Pole. If you spin the bowl, where does the water go? It goes to the widest part.
Equilibrium.
So it comes to the tropics. So all this molten ice actually is going to cause sea level rise. And we don't want that to happen.
The carbon tax scheme has its own problems. People will go, the rich can just keep on polluting. Then they'll just buy a credit and offset it. And then, okay, my conscience is clear. That's one thing. But I think another reason why a lot of people get very put off by climate talk is that we're very jaded, maybe. Because I'm like, I drink out of a paper straw that has the tensile strength of like tissue paper. It's like, it ruins my whole experience. And then I'm doing all this, and then I watch TV and I see some guy on a private jet, and whatever I do will never mitigate in 1,000 lifetimes what 1 year of their flying does, like the kind of damage. So that's the view as a layperson I get, and then I get so annoyed. But what do you say to to that?
I will have two reactions.
Yeah.
First of all, I think it is true that solutions have to be, have a local context. Sometimes I say that, going for straws, actually, it is not the right move because, first of all, it's not very impactful. It's very symbolic. To some people, it can be seen to be a little bit sort of gimmicky. But actually, there are certain things that we can do that has real impact. Air conditioning.
Right.
25 degrees, if you're 22 to 23, you are saving electricity maybe by 6%, 5-6%. Just going back to your point, right? Straws. So in Singapore, for example, we incinerate all our waste, right? So we're not landfilling. So unlike other places, the waste just get dumped into a forested area or whatever. So plastics or straws stays there for hundreds of years. So from an environmental point of view, you want to avoid that, right? But in Singapore, we incinerate. So actually to us, it doesn't really matter that much. But if you can save, if you don't need a straw, why use that consumption, right? So if you can save, right?
I mean, like burning plastic has its own problems, so that's one thing. But
it's not. It's actually captured.
Well, actually, there's some emission, but we try to reduce it as much as possible, and we are working on it. So it's counted. You're right in the sense that there's some capturing, but we are trying to count it, and we're actually charging NEA also. So NEA is also motivated to look at putting some filters to try to reduce emission.
So one thing that I really want to touch on is obviously the upcoming elections. How did it feel when you found out that Yuhua SMC was being dissolved?
Oh, very sad. Yeah, relationship that built up over 20 years is being sort of like transferred.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I've lost my status as a single, and I'm now part of a GRC.
I'm in Bukit Batok, so.
Oh, welcome.
I lost my SMC also. we both lost SMCs this time.
Can I get you to help for?
So I want to find out a little bit more about that because Yuhua is going to be kind of split, right? Half of it is going to be merged with the GRC, and another is going to be part of another SMC. So essentially, your residents, you won't get to serve all of them.
I mean, there's a lot of anxiety, and so very quickly after the announcement, I have to assure them through my posts. I have to call up my sort of key community leaders and explain to them what's happening, and also to arrange visits with my next door neighbor Xie Yaoquan to visit them so that, it's like, hey, don't worry, you are in good hands. And because actually in that precinct, we have a studio apartment, which is really made up of all elderly residents. Many of them are actually living alone.
Right.
They have lost their spouses and they are really alone. And there's a lot of anxiety about who's going to look after me, who's going to know if I'm not well or fallen sick or fell down. It's this fear about, dying alone. We have been like going to them regularly and it's just quite intensive sort of meetings and handshake. Just assure them that, because every time you send a little goodie bag, it's not the goodie bag that matters. It's the fact that, someone checks on me. Someone remembered me, right? And I have someone to say hello to me and I have a chance to talk to someone, socially engaged as well. So, of course, when they hear that, some of them cried. Yeah, when they see me, it's like, why do you have to go? It's like, then we hug each other and cry. So they say, don't worry. There's this nice man here. Then I have to also hand over.
Yeah.
This lady, her background is such.
Yeah.
Can you please make sure that, she's, so we do sort of
But
house
wherever
by
you
house.
go, you should go back and throw one party for them again, one more time.
No, I'm sure that they have parties later on and I'm sure, I'm inviting myself.
Yeah. Is there a difference when contesting as a GRC versus SMC?
I would think so, because as an SMC, you decide, you go, right?
Right, okay.
Yeah, and your issues are just your local issues. But when you're campaigning as a GRC, the GRC is much bigger. So give you an example, SMC, Yuhua, we have a lot of seniors, probably 5 percentage point above national average. But when we are grouped in the GRC, a lot younger families have been included. So the demographic of voters have changed significantly. So how you would, go about campaigning, what it matters to them is going to be rethink, going to be re-strategized.
But kind of less stressful, right?
Why?
It's okay, win and lose as a team, right? As opposed to alone.
Yeah, but we
If
carry
you lose
5 seats,
if you lose the mandate, it's all you. It's like, hey, hello, Grace, what happened?
Yeah, but then if we lose, it's 5 seats.
Yeah, but we take it as a team.
But if you lose, then you can also, there's also 4 other people to blame.
Besides from like an MP's point of view, like for the resident, do you feel that there's a difference in how residents connect with the MPs in GRC versus SMC?
So one of the feedback that I've heard is that one of the mainstream media's vodcasts, they interviewed people on the street and they said, I wish that she would remain an SMC because, I will have her undivided attention. And now that she's a GRC, don't know what will happen,
So cute.
So people, it's a bit worried that, I have to, sort of split my time.
Yeah.
Which is probably a valid one. I probably have to look after a bigger area and go to meet more
I think
residents.
down the road when you see them again, you will cry also. You will get emotional and like, I haven't seen you in 2 years, 3 years, and then you see the auntie that she has aged massively.
Actually, I hope that she'll be happier. Then I will be happy as well, because if the transition is managed well, she's being well looked after, and I'm sure she will get past it.
You mentioned about the area that you served in being of a slightly older population. What are some of the top concerns that they usually bring up to you?
Aging related issue. So from a very sort of bread and butter that we are all familiar with, healthcare availability, polyclinic, how to get an appointment, for example, right? You make, pedestrian crossings so that, wheelchair accessibility is there, right? But actually something that's not quite said about, which I felt quite distinctively with sort of my residents aging, is a mental well-being. A lot more issues of reflection of mental state, such as hoarding, such as neighborly disputes, such as familial disputes, parents and child, between parents. And that's becoming more and more in an aged town. So we have a team, for example, that's always discussing on a bi-monthly basis hoarding cases. Just hoarding cases, 5, 6 are ongoing. And we have to keep at it to find opportunity to go in to clear the hoards. And we have a case of fire that actually killed one of them because he was so deeply embedded in the stuff that he couldn't escape.
I think one of the heartbreaking one is when they are alone, no one contacts them, they have no contact with the outside world regularly, and then when they pass on and no one finds.
Dude, I think
that one scares me the
they
most.
know
It's so
that,
sad.
like when I went to join a bunch of volunteers with the rough sleepers, right? And then I tried to figure out like why. So I asked the volunteers, are these all people homeless or no family to take care of them anymore. And all of the people we met that night, and that was New Year's Eve, all of them had family, most of them have family, but all of them have a home to return to. They are sitting there because of the fear that if they die at home, nobody will know. So they just sit with their friends. Then if they die, right, then at least the friend is there.
So at the community, sometimes we arrange some of these VWOs that does sort of after death care. You will nominate your sort of rituals that you want, and then you will say, okay, how should I be treated, buried, and cremation, and then they will put a sticker of that association on their door, main door, so that anybody, whether it is ambulance or community leaders, would know that this person has a membership with this organization. So they will call if something happens. And also we advise them to sort of open their door. They just have the gate locked so that people walking past could see them. And when you give them the instruments to manage their matters, you can sense that relief,
Right.
Yeah, okay, I know that someone will come and jaga me, and, I will not, be left alone. So you need to give them, empower them to make such decisions when they're still around.
Right.
Okay. So something I think recently that people did kind of have some form of like online debate about was a question or comment that you made about how we're all willing to spend $18 to $20 on pasta. You're probably quite familiar with this. And yet we're not willing to pay a little bit more for wonton mee. And like, I think that's something that I actually agree with, because like a discussion that we've had a couple of times was we, in terms of our mean wages compared to the world, it's at a very decent level, and yet we still expect to pay like $2, $3 for like food. How do you kind of navigate that? Like, especially when prices have to go up, trying to balance between protecting the average Singaporean's wallet versus looking out for hawkers who feed us?
You have absolutely right in the sense that, we are trying to balance the different stakeholders. And of course, I think I acknowledge and agree with the sentiments that hawker centres is actually a good place socially to provide affordable, nutritious food to the everyday Singaporean, to all Singaporeans. And that's why if you looked at the particular podcast that I was involved in, I spent a good amount of time talking about our policies in managing rentals, in investing in hawker centres, making sure that the hawker centres are leased out to storeholders who will run it themselves, and we keep rental low. There are certain restrictions. There's no, subletting, for example, to really control rental. And mean rental is 1,002 at the hawker centre. But I think from time to time, I need to also speak up for the stallholders. Because while we want hawker food to be really affordable, stallholders, hawkers cannot be shouldering the entire social costs of feeding the nation. We need to give them a good living so that it becomes sustainable as a livelihood. And to those who need support, elderly, people with no income or very low income, we have to come in and support them, either with community care, financial assistance, or in my area, for example, they get food vouchers, they get hawker vouchers. So to support these people separately and not deprive the stallholders a chance to make a good living, a decent living.
When I and my friends, watched that, or rather when I watched that and I thought about it, I was like, people I know, and if you have a saying here, it's the streets that I'm on, we're fine to spend that amount of money on hawker food and all that. I think it's we're hyper focusing on the hawker who are occupying the what's it called, the social hawker scheme, the one where they have and you're opening like
social
new
enterprise.
Enterprise, and you're opening like a few more in the next few years, right?
Yes.
That's all fine, which is great. But I feel the issue is a lot about food courts and other establishments where we have such food, because there's only limited number of these social areas where they have cheaper rental.
It's quite hard to discuss this because it always get overlapped, between coffee shop and hawker center. Sometimes when we talk about it, we don't quite able to draw the distinction between a hawker in a hawker center and a hawker in a coffee shop. And sometimes you look at it and say, your rental is so high because you have this, high number of rental at coffee shop. But actually at the hawker centers that the government run, it's actually kept low because we have certain strict sort of restriction. So it's really to keep that like the most basic offering. But obviously we can't be everywhere because the conditions are very restrictive. You have to run your own store. But there's just not so many that's prepared to be a self-employed person. They don't mind working for a chain. So they can actually survive quite well in a food court sort of scenario.
In the meantime, like what is preventing, and I say this as a layperson with not much knowledge of econs, what's preventing the government from initiating rent control on landlord and places where food is being sold to the public? I think it's classified as an essential. I need food to survive, right? What is preventing us from implementing any sort of rent control?
In a very direct way, is that where do you stop? Do you stop at food court? Do you stop at coffee shop? Do you stop at coffee shop at industrial area? It's very hard to draw the line, right? And a policy like that will arbitrarily sort of wipe out the savings of landlords.
Oh,
I mean, whether you like, you have no
Nobody
sympathy
likes
for them.
that.
I don't think I will ever
Until we become landlords.
feel sympathetic to a landlord in my lifetime.
It's also
Right.
quite unfair because I think at some point we need to let market forces kind of do its thing, because if we're always artificially trying to bring down the cost of food, I don't think it's sustainable either.
So the second point is, where do you draw the line? Is it just on food? What if I say that, something like Gravity cannot make too much money? Then we need to nationalize it. Cannot be, right? Because, in a certain
Some people feel
philosophy...
we're already nationalized.
You want to go there, but you brought it up.
Right. It's we are known to be a place where when people invest, there's a certain rule that they invest, knowing that we're going to observe those rules.
Yeah.
You can't just, as you turn to say, now all coffee shop cannot rent control. The better way, I think, is to, like what HDB is doing, requiring their tenants who are running coffee shop to have to offer a sort of a budget meal, so that becomes a term in the tenancy. Where we can control, we want to inject the need for budget meals. So in the new hawker centers as well.
All I really say is I think it's such a valuable part of Singapore that I whatever it is, the cost it is to keep it safe, to keep hawker culture alive, I think it's worth spending. Especially, I read about this somewhere, I can't remember now where, but it's this guy who sells porridge. He's only for $2 a bowl, and he used to be chock full of like proteins, and the people who go to him over the years, they ask him, why you never raise your price? And he just says, because the people who are buying from me, not just you, older people who can't afford anything more.
Yeah.
If I start selling higher prices, they can't they're priced out. I just need enough to make my rent and pay my utilities.
Laksa, I think.
Sure, yeah, I
It's a
can't
laksa
remember
auntie.
exactly.
This
but
is
it's-
really, we said it's
recurring-
socially responsible.
Yeah, and then I
Is
feel
it their responsibility though?
Exactly,
It shouldn't
right?
be their cost.
That's what
Yeah.
I wanted to go back, to this issue. Whose responsibility? It's good that the storeholders has that feel for his customer.
Yeah.
But if you ask the storeholder, why is your son or daughter not taking over the store? It's because for him, this could be a good job at that time because of his skills, of his investment in the store, allows him to have a reasonably good living. But would the second generation or the third generation want to do that and sell it at $2?
yeah.
So how do we attract more new hawkers to step into, this trade if the expectation is that you must keep it at
A common, I guess, feedback or criticism from your comment about the pasta and wonton mee, probably from people who didn't watch the full podcast, was that, you don't understand the struggles of the people, things are expensive now, I want my food to be cheap. And a common, I guess, criticism during election season is that, government don't listen to people or don't have a pulse on people on the ground. How do you combat that sentiment?
that we do spend a lot of time on the ground. I started work at 15 as a waitress. So I've been, talking to people that's my colleagues. I whether they are dishwashing lady or they are chefs. So actually my connection with people actually extends way beyond or before my time in politics. And I spend a lot of time on the ground as well. So people who've seen me in my constituency will know, you want to look for Grace, not difficult to find her in the hawker center or the coffee shop on the weekend. So actually we do care, and we do keep in very close touch. We do house visits on a weekly basis, and you talk to the people and you ask them, how's your job? How's your pay? How's your working hours? If you're a cleaner, you're working 6 days a week and you're getting 1,003, you're being shortchanged. Go and ask for at least 1,006, 1,007 from your employer. So we do that all the time. We get the company, and we say, okay, give me your company, I'll go and write in and chocho a bit.
Wow.
Because they are
Walao,
underpaid.
imagine minister ask you to give you a raise, fella.
Not a
Paiseh,
raise,
sia. Paiseh.
progressive wage.
PWS.
Yeah,
okay,
for
okay,
cleaners, progressive wage for cleaners.
Give them a
It's actually, there.
yeah.
It's already required.
Yeah.
So they are not paying the progressive wage.
I see.
Yeah. So
That's why it's not that I don't want to return my bowl. It's just that I don't want to take away someone's job.
no, there are actually not
That's how I
enough.
justify.
There's actually not enough cleaners. There are not enough cleaners, and we don't want unlimited number of foreign workers. We just don't have the capacity to house them. In order to keep the cost of operation low, we have to do what we can so that overall we can try to manage, the cleaning needs, the washing needs of the center, and we try to keep it low to the operator.
What do you think is the biggest challenge that PAP faces this GE?
I think it's expectations. Expectations, for example, a lot of things that we have been able to achieve are considered hygiene.
Right.
We want more. And that higher and rising expectations is something that we must strive to meet.
But that's not possible if we look at how, let's say, opposition can come in and they don't have to do it. They just need to say, like, don't raise GST. Yeah. How can you raise GST right after a pandemic? That sounds good to me.
Absolutely, it's a very attractive. I
Yeah.
do have residents writing to me is that, if you're not able to reverse the GST, I'm not going to vote for you.
And everyone that disagrees with that will say that, it's because you are privileged. People like me, right? They get, I know I am privileged, but I get labeled privileged for articulating certain thoughts like this.
Yeah.
It feels like to me, with this trend, PAP is just waiting to be eroded.
No,
There's just
I
way
would
to
say
win.
that actually sometimes Singaporeans are able to make the correct decision more than we give them credit. Very often we are shaped by, what social media is talking, and sometimes they may not reflect, sort of the middle, the broad middle. We try to engage them and explain some of these sort of fundamentals, reason, rationale for policies to them. Right now, for example, it's a tariff war that's going on. What is the prospect of economic growth for 2025, 2026? Is this a good time to roll back GST? I mean, Singaporeans are, I'm sure that they are reasonable and they are mature enough to really consider these questions, well.
Dr. Chi also spoke about what he hopes for incumbent to be able to do is to host town halls. They want the whole town hall so that you can hear them talk about stuff they hope you discuss in Parliament.
We
What
actually
do you
do
think about
that all the time. We do that all the time. We may call it town hall. We may not publicize it on social media in that way, but we hold it all the time. Minimally twice each year, right? Budget, after National Day rally. We hold it at the CC, we hold it at the various blocks in the residential area. We have block parties and just to discuss some of these policies. That's like driven by announcements in National Day rally as well as in budget. But on a regular basis, we have block parties, probably every month.
Sorry, what is a block party?
It sounds great.
Blocks?
Yeah.
You have a party, you come down, there's a bit of a gathering, maybe 3 hours.
Oh, it's literally.
And then
never
you sit down and then you have a discussion. It's about whatever policies that you want to ask.
Right.
Yeah. we
I've
have
never
it-
heard of this in my area, so this is all new to me also.
Yeah.
Never heard. Did y'all heard? Did you?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
John, you never heard it.
block
Me
parties,
neither, no.
and then I think Bayam King has coffee talk.
Okay.
Oh,
at
yes.
coffee shops.
Yeah.
Regularly every month. We have our own way,
Right.
depending on our demographic.
Do you think maybe it would have been better if it had been publicized, it had been like on a bigger scale? Because personally, after hearing about that whole town hall idea, I was like, during the time when we were discussing and Parliament was debating on the GST increases, if it had been like televised and then all of, people from every walk of life were able to question our ministers on the spot so they can get an explanation right away. To me, my burning question was, why is it two-tiered? Why was it just not a one-shot increase? Because now the businesses get a chance to double up on the GST. Anyway, all these have been answered in some form or another, but not on a large enough scale that all of us are aware.
A lot of these major decisions have involved various engagements. Whether it is with businesses or whether it is with the community. It's structured that way because, we need to get the sort of stakeholders to voice out. And we have found that sometimes when you have a mixed group, you can't really get them because they're a bit, they're worried about how others will think.
Yep.
They will adjust their feedback.
The virtue signal also.
Yeah. So that's a problem when you're a very mixed group. And sometimes a mixed group, it requires a person to speak up and prior to do public speaking. Not everyone is able to do that well. So sometimes they prefer a lot more informal context. They want to approach you, to have a sort of a way to ask you a personal question so that they don't feel so intimidated. They want you to be more approachable. So we have to find our own ways to engage our own residents. If you are in a younger town, probably something like that will work well. In an older town like mine, I would work on a block party because you basically go to their gathering place. The uncles, aunties are sitting there. So okay, I go there and I talk to them.
You brought up the Tariff War and you are the Minister in charge of Trade Relations. I just wanted to get a quick comment, I guess, because it's really super duper fresh news at time of filming. Was it something that we expected, and what does it mean for Singapore?
Well, we expected some form of tariffs to be imposed because Trump has said so, and Trump has made that sort of a campaign theme, right? So we knew that something is going to come. But I think this extent is beyond our expectation. And obviously, it has a significant impact on global trade. The trade flow amongst countries will change. Trade flows between regions will change, and it will impact the economies of countries that have significant manufacturing output. I was just listening to a radio and I was talking about a company like Nike that sources significant 40-50% of its wear from Vietnam and Cambodia. You will find that hitting the bottom line very, very directly. Can they find alternative, cheaper, nearer home? US, I think those are very big question marks. So what will that higher prices impact consumer behavior, impact the economy? So I think we are all trying to study and predict.
I had a conversation with my wife yesterday, and she was thinking about, okay, so the tariff is that if we are not actively selling anything to America, then does it affect me as a person? Yeah, and so she thought it doesn't affect her in that sense, whereby... So let me explain to her, and I thought it might be useful an analogy that if you're buying an American-made product, so you are the buyer, American-made product has parts from China, those parts go over will be tariffed line. So you as the buyer of those things, everything is not 10% more because you will look at Singapore and it says 10%. So we're not expecting things to get 10% more. We're looking at things to get potentially 30, 40, 50% more because of China's level of tariff.
And we're not even talking about retaliation, right? Because some countries are talking about retaliation.
Like Canada, for example.
Yeah, Canada, EU, for example, China, for example. So which means that it's really going to impact trade. And Singapore's trade is a very significant part of our GDP.
Yeah.
So if trade reduces by, I don't know, a significant amount, obviously some of the companies will be affected.
Right.
So we are watching that very carefully.
How do you see the reshifting of the global trade? Because now that, for instance, Vietnam, which for 40 years they've been a good ally of the US, and then they just got hit with a 50%, is it 49%, something like that, crazy, right? And so now they have to rethink and they have to cozy up to China maybe, who they have been arguing with over the sea. And how does this affect us? Because
it's a new global order. It's a new reordering of the global order. And I think we are all trying to manage this fallout.
Do we see this as a Trump-specific term, or do you feel like this is the way going forward? Because this is Trump's last term. He can't run again.
Oh, well,
he did say that, he did say that he would try to look for ways.
The 22nd Amendment has wording that will let him...
No, really?
We'll get into that later, but there is a way.
Yeah.
So anyway.
But I think that Trump has impacted us in two ways. One, it's very direct from this Liberation Day tariff.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So some would say that, his negotiation stance.
Yeah.
He's going to ask countries to come back, offer something, and he may, make adjustments. But more importantly, I think Trump has also made changes to the administration. So, for example, he has pulled out of climate negotiation altogether.
Like on day
right?
one,
Yeah. So that is actually significantly weakening climate action in the US.
Yeah.
So that will have some more permanent impact. Good people may have been fired, I don't know. We've heard them losing some scientists and losing some experienced administrator. US aid, for example, has been doing a lot of good work. It's now ceased in many countries. So in a case like Myanmar's earthquake, you see a void on rescue and humanitarian actions. So that is something that maybe will be more permanent.
You mentioned that Singapore is so involved in the global scene when it comes to climate action because the impact will impact us a lot, right? Like if the ice caps are melting, we're going to get hit bad. With US pulling out of climate action, how bad is that impact on us? Have you guys been able to measure that?
We think that in the area of promoting climate finance, the last administration was taking a leadership role.
Yeah.
Right? But that tailwind has sort of died down for two reasons. First, there's a change in administration. We know that he's not going to probably put his weight behind climate finance. Secondly, because all this defense reordering, right? Everybody is looking at where do I get more money to increase my defense budget. So there's a tendency now to look inwards. So that also may reduce finance. But we see something that we can do as Singapore because we are a financial hub. Our banks are willing. They're looking for opportunity in green financing. We're seeing how we can, find innovative way to work with partners to, get more people involved. 4 persons go in together so that we are all not risking 100% on one, each one taking 25%, for example, so that we can share the risk a bit better. When we do that, we are getting the resources of 4 persons, multiply that by 10, 20. That's how I think we can bring more climate finance.
Looking at it at a Singaporean perspective, again, trying to find the silver lining here, right? Compared to a lot of other Asian nations, Singapore got the lowest tier of tariffs. Is that because of Singapore's diplomacy and good relations with the US?
I think one of the factors may not be, we are not in the Trump administration. We don't really understand how he has designed this tariff.
ChatGPT,
but I would say...
The word of the street is ChatGPT.
But I think one of the factor was that actually we run a trade surplus in their favor.
Okay.
Yeah. So, there's really no hard basis to put additional tariff on us. But we are not a winner at all because we are such a big trading. We a lot of companies here trade through us with Malaysia, with Thailand, and, with the rest of the world. So when that trading volume is affected, we will be affected. Yep. The volume traded will be affected. So we are not, a winner at all. I think this is going to affect everyone adversely.
All right, guys, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much to Minister Grace for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Do you prefer running an SMC since you ran in both? And I know it's been a while since
You can't say that now, busted already, bro. Busted.
I mean, if I'm putting myself in a politician shoe.
GRC, like, okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about your GRC, but generic GRC,